Hey, what's up, Red Sox Nation? Welcome back to the channel. And today we're breaking down the biggest roster moves the Boston Red Sox have made so far this spring in 2026. And let me tell you, this isn't just routine roster trimming. This is a clear sign of how serious Boston is about shaping the team for opening day, because as camp continues to unfold, the Red Sox are making calculated decisions that are already giving us a strong idea of what this roster is going to look like when the season officially begins. And if you've been following closely, you know that spring training is where teams don't just prepare, they evaluate. And right now, Boston is doing exactly that, making tough choices, sending players down, and locking in roles as the competition gets tighter and tighter. Let's start with the most recent wave of moves, because Boston has already begun trimming down the roster, optioning and reassigning several players to minor league camp as part of their final evaluation process. Names like Sung Chae-Ching, Nick Sagard, Max Ferguson, Tyler McDonough, Mikey Romero, Alan Castro, and Nathan Hickey were all sent down as the Red Sox continue to reduce roster clutter and focus on the players they believe are best suited to contribute at the major league level right now. And these kinds of moves might not grab headlines like blockbuster trades, but make no mistake, they are just as important, because every player sent down tells you something about where they stand in the organization and how the team is shaping its opening day roster strategy. Now, what's really interesting here is that some of these players actually had solid spring performances, which makes the decisions even tougher. For example, players like Tyler McDonough showed flashes of strong production, hitting .280 with an .819 OPS during spring games, while others like Max Ferguson contributed across multiple categories including power and speed. But even with those performances, the Red Sox had to make the difficult call to prioritize roster balance and major league readiness, which shows just how competitive this team has become heading into 2026. And that's something fans need to understand. This isn't about one game or one stat line, it's about long-term fit and who gives the team the best chance to win right now. At the same time, Boston's roster battles are being heavily influenced by bigger structural issues, especially the overcrowded outfield and utility roles, which has been one of the main storylines throughout spring training. With players like Roman Anthony, Jarren Duran, Wiley Abreu, and others all competing for limited spots, the Red Sox are essentially dealing with a situation where there are more talented players than available roles, and that forces tough decisions about who plays, who sits, and who gets optioned. And when you're in a situation like that, roster moves aren't just about performance, they're about balance, versatility, and strategic planning. Another major factor in these decisions is the impact of injuries and roster stability, because as we've seen across the league this spring, teams are constantly adjusting based on health and performance. Some teams are finalizing their rosters early due to strong health and consistent performances, while others are still battling for final spots, and that contrast highlights just how important these final weeks of spring training really are. For the Red Sox, staying healthy and making the right evaluations now is key, because any misstep could impact not just opening day, but the entire season. And speaking of impact, one thing that stands out about Boston's approach this spring is how they are balancing experience with youth. On one hand, you have established veterans and proven players who are expected to contribute immediately. On the other hand, you have rising prospects and younger players pushing for opportunities, creating a constant internal competition that ultimately benefits the team. This is exactly how contending teams operate. They create depth, but also allow that depth to push performance across the board. And the Red Sox are clearly leaning into that philosophy in 2026. Now let's talk about what these roster moves really mean. When a team starts optioning players and narrowing down the roster, it's a signal that opening day decisions are getting close. It means roles are being defined, lineups are being set, and bullpen spots are becoming more competitive than ever. It also means that players who are still on the bubble need to step up quickly, because every remaining spring game matters. And for players who have already been optioned, it's not necessarily the end of the road, it's an opportunity to continue developing and potentially get called up later in the season if needed. Another interesting angle here is how these moves could connect to future trades. Because when a team trims down its roster and identifies surplus talent, that often opens the door for potential trade discussions. We've already seen the Red Sox involved in multiple roster adjustments this offseason, and if depth continues to build in certain areas, it wouldn't be surprising to see Boston explore ways to turn that into additional pitching or impact pieces. And that's something fans should keep an eye on, because roster moves in spring training often set the stage for bigger decisions down the line. At the same time, the Red Sox are not just making cuts, they're also finalizing roles and evaluating key contributors who will be part of the opening day roster. That includes position battles, bullpen competition, and rotation decisions that are still being closely watched by the coaching staff. Every pitch, every at-bat, and every defensive play matters at this stage, because these final evaluations can determine not just roster spots, but also playing time and depth chart positioning once the season begins. And let's not forget, this is all happening as Boston prepares for a competitive 2026 season where expectations are high. The Red Sox have already made moves to improve their roster, and now it's about execution, consistency, and making sure the right players are in the right roles. That's why these spring moves are so important. They're not just about today, they're about setting the tone for the entire season. So here's the big takeaway. The Red Sox are actively shaping their roster through a series of calculated spring moves, optioning players to the minors, evaluating talent, and narrowing down the competition as opening day approaches. Some players are stepping up, others are being sent down, and the front office is working behind the scenes to finalize a team that can compete at the highest level. And while these moves might seem routine on the surface, they are actually critical pieces of a much larger puzzle that will define Boston's 2026 season. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think about these roster moves so far? Are the Red Sox making the right calls, or do you think some players should have been kept on the roster? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I want to see what Red Sox Nation is thinking about these decisions. And if you want more Red Sox news, roster updates, and breaking analysis just like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and stay locked in with the channel, because as soon as more moves drop, you already know we're covering everything right here. Stay tuned because this roster is still taking shape.